Anyway, we're thankful that you're here, and to you folks online, we're thankful that you're there too, and we're gonna have a good program for you tonight. So we are the Charlotte chapter of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation, one of 18 throughout the state, and we focus on conservation of urban wildlife and its habitat. You can find us and you can find our programs and events on Facebook or on Instagram, and we have a YouTube channel. If you want to check that out, there's a really cool video on there that one of our team leaders made about vultures. So it's sort of geared for kids, but you know, we always learn stuff, don't we? So I encourage you to use it. No. Okay, so our mission is to create, protect, and preserve habitat through education, engagement, and enjoyment, and we actually try to combine all three of those E's in anything that we do. This is a picture from Chantilly Ecological Sanctuary that's down in the Chantilly neighborhood outside the street, and we do quite a bit of work there in partnership with Stormwater Services and Park and Rec. In March, we did a cleanup on Briar Creek and got about 140 pounds of trash out of the creek. All right, Alden, still.
Just click on the screen.
Click on what?
Click, just click.
Just go. Oops. All right, I might have skipped one. Anyway, ways that we support conservation, and you can support conservation with us as volunteer. I see some familiar faces here, the people that volunteer with us fairly regularly. During the summer months, we don't do quite as much because it's hot and people are gone, whatever, but we will have some things coming up in the fall that we will need extra hands for. You can also join our chapter or donate to our chapter. We are a nonprofit and run totally on donations. That's how we get things done. The other thing, and you'll hear more about this from Allison tonight, is to practice sustainability on your own property. This is my compost bin. It's now only about that high, and it'll end up about that high, but it's worth it. The other thing you can do is brush pile in your yard, stick that back, you know, maybe where you don't have to see it, but that's great for insects, lizards, small mammals. The birds love it because insects get in and the birds like it, and they also take shelter, can take shelter in there during bad weather. Right now, you know, across the country, there's something called No-Mow May, which may or may not work here. For us, it's sort of more like No-Mow March, but I'll kind of leave that up to you whether you want to do something like that. The other thing is to use native plants in your landscaping. That is good for that. So we do have a couple things coming up. Our big fundraiser is Water on the Water, and I've talked about that before. I'm mentioning it here because if you have your own kayak or canoe, you can probably still join us. All of the kayaks and canoes that we're using from Park and Rec have been reserved, but if you have your own, you can go on and still sign up through May 15th, I think.
It's almost full, I think. There might just be a few spots left.
There might just be a couple spots, but anyway, if you're really down to determine. The other thing, the fun thing is on June 16th, we have moth night. How many of y'all been mothing? Okay. It's a lot of fun. So we're doing this with a guy named Lanny Lampel. He's not just resources supervisor for the county, and he knows moths. He has been documenting moth species in our county for several years, and now we have I think just over 1,000, which is amazing. There are 10 times more moths than there are butterflies. We just don't see them because they're in the night crew. But this is a good chance to do that. We'll be at Reedy Creek Nature Center. Set up a big white sheet. We'll do two of them, two big white sheets with black lights, a couple different areas, and we just bounce back and forth. And you know, it's not only the moths that we find, but there are all kinds of cool things out at night. So I encourage you to sign up for that, and don't wait because we do have limited space on that because you can't be walking all over each other. So we can do that. And then I'm thinking the slide that I skipped.
Just go back.
Which, okay,
You
No,
didn't skip anything.
no.
This one?
That one. Oh, no. This happens every time and it's always different, whatever the technical issue is. But anyway, thanks for bearing with me. So the way you can support wildlife, like I said, Allison will be addressing this in more detail, is they all need the same things we need. We need to eat, we need water. That's probably the most important thing. We need places for shelter, that rain today. They need to get out of that just like we do. And they need places to raise their family, which is going on right now, even as we speak. So you can certify your yard with the National Wildlife Federation. We have a little pamphlet back there with information about how to do that. You can also register on the Butterfly Highway, which is a program in North Carolina Wildlife Federation. That's about creating pollinator pit stops on your property. And it can be as small as plants in a pot on a balcony to your entire yard. So there's a lot of flexibility in that. And you can find that information on the North Carolina Wildlife Federation Butterfly Highway. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Allison. So Allison, I'm going to have to read this. So Allison Channell, she's the District Conservation Manager at the Mecklenburg Soil and Water Conservation District. She's a conservation biologist with a background in fisheries, wildlife, and conservation practices. As conservation manager, she works with local municipalities, producers, and private residents in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area to implement conservation's best management practices. So I will unshare my screen. Share. What do you, did I unshare my screen? What did I do? Click on share. Oh, stop share. Maybe next year I'll know what I'm doing.
And then let's mute you. Let's get that muted and turn your video. Yeah, because you're hooked up to the, that was dumb.
That's not gonna work.
No, because you're the one who's hooked up to the.
Oh. Sorry.
It's
Talk
alright.
amongst yourselves.
Just log back in. It'll pop right back up. Okay. And now I gotta stop here.
This all gets edited out on the
Because you
recording.
logged out.
All right, I guess when, as he's setting all that up, I'll just talk a little bit. So thank you, Donna, for that introduction. Thank you to the Wildlife Stewards for hosting tonight. Like Donna said, my name is Allison. I'm the District Conservation Manager over at Mecklenburg Soil and Water Conservation District. We are a non-regulatory agency focused on non-point source pollution, erosion, and water quality issues. We've been around for more than 20 years, but we did start our urban conservation cost share program in 2004. And since then, we've expanded to all the municipalities within Charlotte, including the 6 that surround the city. And we are also a subset of the State Division of Soil and Water, so we implement their cost share practices as well. And my presentation will be on backyard conservation. So we will talk about wildlife, but there are some really other important things as well that I'd like to touch on, including my favorite, soil. So
And just tell the folks online, they can put their questions in the chat and we'll take them at the end.
all right, so if you got questions online, just put them in the chat and we'll address everybody's questions at the end. All right, so what I like to tell every homeowner that I run into during a site visit is to plan out what your conservation objectives are. So I would assume for most people in here, it would be planning or plantings during the planting season for wildlife. Maybe that's to promote more habitat. Maybe that's to provide more of a food source. Now, what we work with, I like to tell people to work literally from the ground up. So that means soil on up to plants, on up to wildlife and water quality. So you want to make sure that you're setting something that's feasible, not only something that you can do, but something you can afford as well. And then we'll also talk about what to do if you need help. So reaching out to different agencies like the Stewards or like MSWCD. All right, so let's dig into soils. Soil is, a lot of people like to call it dirt, but I see it as something a lot more complex. They have a lot of different types of soils, but they break down into three major types. We have sand, clay, and loam. And each of these different types have ecosystem functions. You'll see a picture of the soil food web over there. And just to break it down a little bit more, soil works not only as a filter for nutrients, but also as a sponge. So anything that we put on the ground could potentially end up leaching into below the topsoil into our nutrients in our groundwater. So soil will works for filtering nutrients, but also promotes plant life, water quality, air quality, and then also provides habitat for wildlife and of course where we live. So you don't want your house caving in, right? You want to make sure that you are building on some sturdy ground. So what to do if you don't know anything about soil? I like to tell people the first thing you should do is do a soil test. And I actually brought some, they're on the table over there. Feel free to grab one. We use the state soil test, so it gets sent off to Raleigh, and they test for nutrients. It's scientifically called an agronomic test, which is just a fancy word to tell you what exactly your soil is made of. So it'll tell you the pH, any lime recommendations, and then the NPK ratio, which is the nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus levels. It doesn't always have to be that complicated. You can hop on over to Lowe's and go get a self-test, and it'll give you a broad range of results. But if you want something very specific for your soil, go ahead and get one of those state tests. Right now, there's no fee because we're in season, so this is a great time to take advantage of that. If you are planting, make sure that you're testing your soil every 3 years. But if you're planting for something very specific that is kind of non-tolerable to some of our big weather events, kind of like today's storm, you're going to want to test every year. So vegetables, if you're doing some kind of small rotation in your backyard, that's testing every year. And then keep on the lookout for any additives that you might need, like mulch or compost. You'll see whenever you're digging in your backyard, there's a layer on top of the soil. It's rich and dark. It almost looks like potting soil. And that is the topsoil layer. That is very important. It contains all of the organic matter needed to plant new plant life. And you want to make sure that that nutrients goes back into the soil, because if we get a rain like we did today, it has the potential for running off and leaching into our groundwater. So when you are doing a soil test, make sure you're taking a representative sample. One of the stories that we like to tell people is we had a homeowner who was complaining about really high metal counts in her soil, and she couldn't figure out why, and all of her plants were dying. But they were only dying around the area of the chicken coop that she had. And you'd be like, I wonder why. And we actually found out that the high metal count was the zinc found in chicken manure. So that was not a representative sample of something in her far yard, right? Kind of by the fence line. It was just by the chicken coop. So obviously you wouldn't be planting something near a chicken coop if you knew that, but make sure that you're taking from multiple locations. All right, let's get into some water. So like I said before, soil acts as both a filter and a sponge. It's able to soak in some of the runoff and also filter the nutrients. Water is very important for we've all learned the water cycle. We all know that the importance of those environmental services. And then anything carried in the water can affect the surrounding soils. And a great example of this is you'll see if we're all in Charlotte, we all see the gutters and the culverts. Sometimes the water looks a little murky, looks sedimenty, kind of grainy. That can be from people adding seeds, sod, lime, any kind of fertilizer to their grass to help the grass grow. All of that ends up downstream. So we want to make sure that if we are adding anything, we're very well aware of our surroundings. Yeah, and this is a great example of what we deal with at MSWCD every day. So we may not all have a stream in our backyard, but we've probably seen a stream in Charlotte that kind of looks like this, where the banks are really high and incised, there's steep slopes. And then when we get a heavy rain or hurricane season, you'll see the water rise pretty high. And sometimes it will overtop the bank and spill over. So making sure that we are aware of those areas. And if you do have a stream and you're worried about it, it's always good to contact a professional. Other types of erosion that you might see, the top here is sheet and rill erosion. You'll usually see them together. Sheet erosion just means that the top layer of soil is taken off by the water. If it's rill erosion, there's these tiny little ribbons. You'll see the indents on the soil there. And then if it does progress into anything larger, you'll get what's down here called gully erosion, and it almost looks like the water has created a ditch. And this is caused by fast moving or persistent water, and it can result in some sedimentation, like I said, that grainy kind of consistency in your water that you might see. You want to monitor for any signs of erosion or sedimentation on your property and properly address that if it is a safety concern. So soil can be used in methods to reduce erosion, and you might see them in practices like berms. That's just a built up area it's kind of like a bumper for the water. Swales, which look like grass-lined ditches, diversions, and we call them soil burritos, but basically they are long containers of soil that help direct the water flow, and it also protects the topsoil. All right, so I know I talked about at the beginning during the introduction that we work with non-point source pollution. Point and non-point source pollution kind of get a little bit confused sometimes. And what I like to say is if it's point source, you can actually point at it. So you can tell exactly where it's coming from. If it's non-point, it's a little bit harder to tell exactly where it's coming from. It could be fertilizer from a neighborhood. It could be pet waste that people didn't pick up. It could be even leaf litter, which contributes to high pH in water and soil. So, and on the note of pet waste, in Charlotte, in the city of Charlotte, pet waste is the #1 contributor to non-point source pollution. People not picking up after their pets severely degrades our water quality and also affects the health of our soils. So simple things that we could do: picking up after your pets, making sure that we're not blowing any of our grass clippings or leaves into the gutters. You want to make sure that you're either bagging them up or composting them responsibly. Not mowing to the edge of your water. We want to create what's called a riparian buffer. That is 15 to 30 feet of grass or vegetated area on the edge of the water and back. So that area will just allow for the capture of nutrients and will help balance out the pH in the water. Different environmental factors to look out for. I'm sure everybody has seen a pond in this area that looks really green, and those are algae blooms. So limiting the runoff into our ponds will help with that as well. Algae is very, it actually limits the amount of oxygen available in the pond, which can lead to fish kills. So we want to make sure that's not affecting our wildlife as well. Limiting our runoff and making sure that we are taking out invasive species that are competing with our natural species. And we'll talk about that on a later slide. So one of the things that the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area has to deal with regularly is the increase in impervious surface. Impervious surface is just a flat area that can be concrete, pavement, sidewalks, even roofs, or parking lots. These areas, they they accelerate the amount of water that is rushing downstream. So we want to make sure that we are limiting the redirect and influence of where the water's going, the rate of the flow, and then exactly where they're draining to. Making sure that we have those buffers, like I said, before it gets to a stream or creek. Great recommendations. I mean, we see groups of people in their neighborhoods, or maybe they're working with the wildlife stewards or doing something with stormwater services where they're cleaning up a creek. That's a great way to let us know where the problems are with our streams and creeks, but also helps making sure that the water quality improves, as well as the wildlife habitat. So runoff is another big problem, and this is caused by impervious surface. So these are two pictures actually from one of our projects that we've done. Runoff is just water flowing from an outside source and across a landscape into a water body. So oftentimes this runoff will contain pollutants, soil, debris, construction materials. I've even seen tires and shopping carts end up in a stream just because they're close to a parking lot or a development. So it can cause ecosystems and streams to destabilize, which would mean that we'd have to go in and redirect the stream, which is a major financial cost, and it's a big responsibility for us as well, for our team members. So road runoff can affect private property if you live near a major roadway. It can also result in sheet and rail gully erosion. So it's something to look out for. You can see the beginning of sheet erosion on these two pictures as well.
What did you do? What
Yeah.
was the work done to
Let's see if I can.
change that?
Okay, so hopefully everybody can see. But what we do is implement this, it's called coir matting, C-O-I-R. It's actually made out of coconut fiber. So there's two different types of matting. You can have this one, which is temporary, or a permanent liner, but we always try to opt for the temporary one because it will naturally degrade over time and return nutrients back to the soil. Since this site was undergoing sheet erosion, we were able to implement the coir matting and anchor it into the soil. It keeps that top layer healthy and intact. And then it also allows you to plant native plants within it. So it has these little indents that overlap like this, and you can just use the plug or a live stake, whatever you want to plant, and it will grow from there. So I think the lifetime on that is 10 to 15 years for coir matting before it naturally will start to break down. So it's not something that you'll have to go in and replace or tear out. If you're doing something like a permanent liner, it will naturally fray and you'll have to tear it out and replace it. Well, if you are doing something by yourself, obviously that comes out of your own pocket. But if you apply for one of our BMPs through our cost share programs, we are able to supply that at a 75-25% cost share rate. And I'll go over the different types of practices that we implement, but that is one of them. Okay, other ways to manage the runoff that aren't liners. You can reroute your downspouts. I see this all the time when I do site visits at people's houses. It just turns out that their gutter system is faulty. It's either backed up or it dumps directly into the soil and it kind of eats out into a hole. Extending those downspouts or rerouting them to a grassy area, maybe it's more naturalized, significantly helps with this issue. Other things we have up here, a cistern and a rain barrel. So a cistern is much, much larger. It can be above or below ground. So if it's above ground, it's easier to maintain. If it's below ground, it's out of sight, but you're not always privy to what exactly is happening. So you want to make sure that you're keeping an eye on that. And then at the bottom is a rain barrel. This is probably the most popular I see in Charlotte. We used to sell 60 to 80 gallons, and that was appropriate for this area. And they're great because they have a screen protector so mosquitoes won't lay eggs. I know that's a lot of people's concern. They don't want that in the summer. So implementing something like that is really easy and cheap and helps with the runoff management. Other things, critical area planting, swales, and rain gardens. I'll talk about that at the end because those are 3 practices that we actually offer. So backyard rain gardens, this is a great picture of one of our rain gardens that we've actually implemented. Rain gardens are beautiful, they're practical, but I will say they are a lot of work. So if you do implement a rain garden on your property, you're in it, you know. So it's it can be quite a financial strain as well by having to replace the plants. But basically, it's a multi-tiered system at the bottom of a grade. So you can kind of see how it's kind of bowled out there. And that just, it's a rain capturing device. So all the water from your yard will dump into this area and it will naturally lower over time as the plants soak up the water and provide habitat. It takes about, let's say 24 to 36 hours, at most 72 hours to drain out. Rain gardens usually aren't that big because we don't want to make sure that the water is ponding for long periods of time. That can cause mosquito growth. While we do try to plant plants that will promote dragonflies or natural predators for mosquitoes, it's not always a guarantee. So talking about some of the water drainage, like I said, it's a multi-tiered system. So you have rock, soil, and sand, and the water will just naturally progress downwards over time into the roots of the plants, and then it will promote more plant growth. But they do sometimes fail because people aren't replacing the plants or taking care of them as they should. So really, this is probably the most important slide, safety. When you're doing your backyard conservation planning, always make safety a priority. Like I said, don't block drainage areas. Sometimes you can get fined for that and they will come after you. Stormwater Services does not like it when you block the drainage areas. So you want to identify utility and construction areas. You'll probably see these all around Charlotte. It's call 811 before you dig. They're great. They'll be out there within 2 days to flag where the utility lines are. You want to be mindful of your neighbors. You know, don't make enemies. Make sure that you're doing something that is not going to upset them. You want to maintain awareness of elevation, slopes, and drop-offs. You know, don't fall in the stream if you're going to take a picture. And always consult your professionals because we're here to serve you guys and we're glad that we get the opportunity to. So plants, trees, and other vegetation. So I know Donna talked a little bit about composting. That's a great way to promote your backyard conservation. So not only does it create habitat for wildlife, but you're able to naturally degrade some of the materials from your household. So it decreases the need for amendments of fertilizers and improves soil quality and health, helps return that organic layer that's found in the topsoil. It helps with the absorption of water and filtering contaminants. Like I said, soil is a filter. And it will help with the runoff situation as well. Composting helps plants use the nutrients in soil effectively. So soil can only take so much, right? And once it's full, it won't take any more nutrients. So it can only take so much nitrogen, so much phosphorus, so much potassium before it has to just let the other nutrients go. So we want to make sure that we're not overloading. If you're going to use something like a fertilizer, make sure you pay attention to the ratios on the bags. If you do a soil test, it will tell you exactly which kind of fertilizer you need to buy. So other things like mulching are great. You don't even have to go out and buy the really expensive mulch. You can actually use leaf droppings. That's a great way to naturally mulch your area. I like to recommend a triple ground hardwood mulch. That is a mulch that has gone through the grinder 3 times. It has a higher density, which means that when it rains and it soaks in the water, it won't float away. One of the brands, I think you can get it at Lowe's and Home Depot, it's called No Float. So sometimes when you're putting down those big barky mulches, they'll float away after a big rain and you will actually see your money go right down the drain. So you want to make sure that you're getting something that's worth your money and will actually work. Things to be aware of: in the past 2 years or so, I have seen some mulching that it's a hardwood. So it has that light skinny wood, but in the middle, it will have a bright green. And what that means is that it's tied up the carbon. So that will affect the pH in your soil. Make sure that if you are going to buy something or somebody selling mulch to you that looks green, look at the whole thing and maybe don't buy that one. Go buy the no float. So mulching, another thing is that it's great for nutrient cycling and also the weed suppression in your yard. So if we're covering the weeds, they can't photosynthesize and can't grow more. So just a great way to limit some of that.
What about color mulch? Is the color bad?
It depends. So if it's naturally that color, that's fine. Sometimes mulches are dyed for aesthetic purposes. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. I like to use a natural hardwood. All right, so choosing the right plant for the right space. I think this is great. If you haven't already, go ahead and check out the Master Gardener's Toolbox on the NC State Extension website. If you put in the moisture level, the light, how much space, for aesthetic purposes, what you want it to look like color-wise, what wildlife you want to attract by planting, it'll tell you the exact species, and then if it's native, and what the pros and cons are for that species. So again, that's the NC State Extension Master Gardener's Toolbox. Great resource. So
comment on best practices for mulching around trees and shrubs and such, because I always see people piling like, a foot worth of mulch right up against the tree trunk and that kind of thing, I think.
yeah, that's a great point. So one of the things that is really important to remember, you don't want to crowd your trees. So we call it tree collaring when it's kind of snug and it looks like it's wearing a turtleneck. You want to make sure it's breathing. So you don't want to expose the roots, right? You want to cover those, but then right where the trunk is, let it breathe. And mulch doesn't need to be a foot thick. You just want to get enough so it's covered and that it won't float away. I hope that answered your question. So other plant tips, look for signs of poor health. You might see some bare spots in your lawn or discoloration in your plants. Any poor productivity if you're expecting one of your flowering plants to flower and it doesn't, or slow development, maybe it never gets out of the bud phase, So my recommendation would be first to consult your soil test, and then second, go on that Master Gardener's Toolbox and see maybe it's planted in the wrong space. Maybe I need to change the pH. And then if it's not fixed by then, that's when you call a professional to come out and look. All right, native plants. So North Carolina is great because we have so many great native plants that look beautiful and serve a great purpose. They have environmental services like the Habitat for Wildlife. In this picture here, you can see different birds, butterflies. Let's see if I can make that bigger. Sometimes they'll produce berries, nectar, and fruit. So let's see. Not only do
you guys, I apologize.
that's fine.
I'm looking at the bar.
So not only are they great for the environment, but they're also aesthetically pleasing. I personally love the Eastern redbud in the springtime. In the spring, I drive around sometimes and you see that cursed Bradford pear tree, and you're like, it's so beautiful. It has those white flowers, and they're everywhere. But they're non-native. They're invasive. They're invasive. So they look great, but a flowering dogwood also looks great. So, yeah. Right. Thank you. Yeah. Right. So, you want to make sure that you're attracting your local wildlife and pollinators so that we get more of those native plant growth. Great places to get your native plants. I always like to point out your local nurseries and greenhouses. It's always good to support your local businesses. But if you don't live near one, lawn and garden stores are always very knowledgeable. But make sure that you come in with an idea of what you want, because they may not be so well versed with conservation of wildlife. So let's see. Oh, well, we brought up the Bradford pear, and here it is. Like I said, they look great, but they're not great. So the Bradford pear is evil cousin, the kudzu. You'll see that everywhere as well. We want to make sure that we are removing those. So there's 3 ways to remove invasive plant species. You have chemically, biologically, and mechanically. So us at MSWCD, we don't recommend doing it chemically. You want to make sure that you're doing it biologically or mechanically, which means removing it by hand, or you're finding a natural predator for that species. That would be a little bit harder, but if you've ever seen a video of kudzu being removed, you'll know what I'm talking about. You can take a skid steer in there, wrap it around, and it will all come out at once. Yeah, it looks like spaghetti, so it's all interconnected. But invasive species, it's important to keep an eye on them because they can reduce the population of our threatened native species. And we want to make sure that there's plenty of resources to go around. They're very competitive, so sometimes they'll compete for sunlight, nutrients, and environmental services. So things to be aware of if you are going to plant, make sure you avoid noxious and invasive weeds. If you go on that Master Gardener toolbox, it will actually tell you if it's noxious or not, so, or poisonous. So make sure that you are, you know what you're going to plant and that you can ID them correctly. Yeah.
You said with the biologically way to remove it. And I've heard, so we have like alligator weed in one of our lakes, and I've heard there's like a natural beetle as a predator to eat it. But who do you go to? Like, what would be a resource to go to, you know, just investigate that further?
That's a great question. I would, I think I would reach out to NC State Extension. I might be biased because I went to NC State and we did a lot of studies with that, and in Raleigh, you know, they even had, they had carp that they would release, you know, so starting with the extension, I think they would probably have a better idea than I would. Yep.
They're the closest around here, so the university there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great idea. So woody vegetation. So this is a little bit different. These are your trees and shrubs, lot larger in size. Making sure if you're gonna plant them, be aware of what's around you. Don't plant a huge oak right next to your house or right next to your fence and have it in a couple years fall over. Be aware of competition. If it's a sapling tree, make sure you're not planting it under larger trees with a bigger canopy that's going to block out the sun, right? Want to make sure that they have their own space because, you know, they also want to grow. Appropriate species selection, you know, don't buy into those pretty invasives. I know they look good, but they're not going to do well in the long run for your natives. Root, trunk, and canopy health. This is what I was talking about with covering the root collar. You know, your tree doesn't need to be wearing a turtleneck at all. If you're gonna mow around trees, don't run over the don't run over the roots. I see that all the time, and it will result in insect invasions, or it will result in the tree becoming sick. So we don't want any of that as well. Over pruning. I used to have a coworker who despised when people would cut down their crepe myrtles, and she would call it crepe murdering because they looked like they were headless. So that is a great example of over pruning your trees. Some landscapers will say that it's necessary. It's not always necessary. So, you know,
the landscape, with grounds maintenance people from ramming their lawnmowers into the trunks of the trees too. Because
yes. Absolutely. Trees are just as susceptible to getting sick, just like we are. So monitoring discoloration, any oozing, they will ooze out a sap, a sticky sap, and it looks like tree blood. But that sometimes it's, you know, they're just growing. Other times it does mean that they're sick. It's always good to have an arborist come out and look if you're really concerned. And then monitoring for pests and disease. We don't live in an area where the emerald ash borer has completely decimated our trees, but if we did go a little bit west, we would see that. So we do also have the southern pine beetle that is here, making sure that you're aware of what could affect your trees in the long run, especially if you have a big one near your house or fence. All right, everybody's favorite is wildlife. All right. So I'm sure you guys all know this, but if you want to attract wildlife, you have to give them their necessities. So what do they want? They want food, water, shelter, and space. Sometimes wildlife will have special requirements. all these might not apply to one species or the area that you live in. If you're living in Uptown, you might not see these species, but if you live out in a more rural area, you might. So some of the highlights from this edge habitat, if you've seen a deer out in these big open fields, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's right where the tree stands stop and the field starts. They love that. They love being able to graze and then quickly jump back into the forest to get some cover. So if you want to attract deer, I haven't met a lot of people that do, but if if you want to, edge habitat, snag trees and logs. These are great if you are a birder and you want to see those woodpeckers. They love these, as long as it's not a safety concern for your property and you want to keep a snag tree. It's just a dead tree, looks like just a trunk, no top. Making sure that you're providing roosting or nesting spots. This could just easily be a birdhouse if you want to attract birds. Dens, caves, hollows, making sure that you're not caving any of those in or running over them with a lawnmower. Streamside corridors, this can be for your salamanders, your newts, your frogs, any amphibious creature. Pools, connected waterways, and migratory flyovers or corridors for transportation. We're not really going to see that in the city, but sometimes you do. And you'll see in the fall, the geese will fly over and they'll land in a retention pond, So that's just something to keep an eye out for. But if you are one of the lucky ones that has a pond on your property, now you know how to manage it. So different types of habitat. I kind of already touched on this, but you'll see streams and ponds, lawns, fields, meadows, or wooded areas. Ecosystems are very different from habitats. Ecosystems much larger. So within an ecosystem, you can have different habitats. So you can have wildlife coexisting with each other. And if that is something that you're interested in, make sure that you're taking those different species into account. So you can have, if you want to attract insects and you're planting native plants, maybe don't put a birdhouse right over it, because then the birds will eat the insects. Or bat houses. If you want to do brush piles, rotting logs, to attract some of our smaller mammals or amphibians or reptiles, maybe trim the grass around it so that doesn't attract snakes that eat the small mammals and the amphibians and reptiles. Unless you want, great point. If you want snakes, go ahead, I love snakes as well. So, and then a newer thing that I've seen people talking about, especially on social media, are these toad abodes. They're really, really cute. They look like little toad houses. If you are going to do something like this, though, this actually goes for any kind of wildlife that you're providing water for. Make sure that they can get out. You want to put something in. If it's in a bird bath, you want to put a little ledge in there or something. If it's a toad abode, it actually looks like real steps that they can get out. All right, planting for wildlife. Again, I kind of already went over this, but planting something that you actually want to see. Don't plant for things that you don't want to see that become a pest, because if you feed an animal, it will come back. So select a diverse variety so they have something to choose from. And don't plant something that will attract, let's say, a deer, and then they'll eat the rest of it. You know what I mean? So if they see one thing that they like, they'll eat the rest of it. There are plants that you can plant to deter them, especially if you have deer. You can plant dill or rosemary or lavender. They don't like those. I know in my own yard, I have a whole group of rabbits that just love to ravage anything in my garden. So marigold, or they also don't like lavender. If you plant something like that, it usually keeps them at bay. You might have to use something like a wildlife exclusionary technique, fencing, or a border around your garden. But in the most severe cases, obviously hiring someone to come remove them and put them in a better place. But just make sure that you are getting a variety that's not going to attract something you don't want to see. All right, pollinators and beneficial bugs. A lot of people don't like bees, but bees are great. They're one of our best pollinators, actually. So beetles, birds, bats, and other insects are great for pollinating your garden. We love to see ladybugs. We love to see those earthworms. That just means that they're doing their job and that your garden's healthy, right? So pollinators are threatened every single day with our growing cities. So any development and other land use that destroys their valuable habitat, we want to make sure that they have a place to go, right? Pollinator gardens, something to consider is the location, but also the level of management. You know, when I talked about rain gardens, how management focused they are, if that's something that you don't really have time or money for, you know, don't invest in it. Maybe start a little bit smaller and make it bigger as you go. So understanding your backyard, understanding what you want to see and what thrives.
For you, for instance, it really bums me out to see these mosquito people in the neighborhoods. Even the ones that are so-called organic and non-impactful of the wildlife. And the people that are usually applying these things, they have no idea what they're doing. You can smell the drift a whole block. And I'm sorry, that's my rant on that. But is there something that you can do about it? Complain about the company itself? Or?
See, that's a little bit hard for us because we're non-regulatory. So I can't tell someone to spray or not to spray on their personal property. If you're really concerned about it, I would consider talking maybe to some legal service about a nuisance of smell. If it's an HOA. If it's really becoming a concern. We always like to promote a more natural way of combating some of those pests. So like I said, dragonflies are great for limiting mosquito populations. Make sure you don't have any standing water so that they don't have a place to lay their eggs, that kind of thing. But other than that, there's not much that I could do unless someone else has a good.
Change out your bird baths at
Yeah.
least every 3 days.
Yeah, no standing water.
No
Mhm.
standing water.
I've also seen signs, mostly in Concord, but they'll say, don't spray here and like don't mow. I can tell they're not mowing. So I'm like, well, that's good. And these are on state roads.
Okay, yeah.
But I said, don't spray. I'm like, well, I wonder, I mean, I'm sure not every spray person will care, but some might turn it off when they go by you.
Oh,
So
yeah.
even just doing that, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great way. That's a great way. So
Little yard
Oh, like,
sign.
yeah, okay. So
Yeah.
yard sign, like, please don't spray around my yard. or something.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I like that. I like that. Non-combative. All right.
One thing people in groups like this could do is join together and set up a management for landscapers. And if they're doing a good job, give them a gold star of the environment. Attract those people who know what they're doing.
Like give them 5 stars.
Coalition.
Like give them 5 stars, like they do it right, yeah.
Exactly. Social media is good.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that you want to do, it's not that coalition.
Yeah. Yeah, great idea. Thank you. All right, so this is the last part I'm going to talk about, and this is only for Mecklenburg Soil and Water Conservation District. So these are our cost share programs. And this slide has a lot of information, but I'm going to sum it up for you. We have 6 different practices that are available. So what this means is we come out to your site, we evaluate the situation. Maybe you have a water quality issue, let's say. We'll come out there, we'll take some measurements, we'll do the site visit, and then we rank your project. So what happens is we'll put it into our system online, and it will automatically spit out a number that ranks against other projects, but also how severe the issue is. So with that information, we look at the 6 different practices that we provide, which are a swale, grass-lined swale, critical area planting, riparian buffer management, stream stabilization, pet waste receptacles, and rain gardens. So if your situation falls into one of the practices that might be able to help, we will work with you to implement them. Some cases, the person will not get a high enough number to qualify, and that's okay, because at MSWCD, we provide free technical assistance. So we can provide you with all the technical information to implement it on your own. That also includes doing a soil test for you so that we can give you a specific list of plants that will help you attract the wildlife that you want. That will be best fitted for your soil and will help with water reuptake. So having that kind of assistance, I think, is key. If you do, however, qualify and get a high enough number, we will work with you to carry out our contract process. We have a great board of supervisors that votes on each project to see which one we will take on. Basically, I will give them the information needed to vote on it. But what will happen is if they do approve, we move forward with a contracting process, and the contract is a 75-25% split. So we provide up to 75% reimbursement for these best management practices. The homeowner covers 25%, and we cap every project at $15,000, meaning that that price cannot go above 15. Yes.
Can you repeat all of the different types of things?
Yes. Yeah. So stream stabilization, riparian buffer management, rain gardens, swales, grassland, pet waste receptacles, and I'm missing one, rain gardens. Oh, critical area planting. Thank you. When I do it twice, sometimes I leave one out. Okay, so I do have to clarify that swales, the only swales that we do are grass lined. Sometimes you'll see rock lined swales. We don't do that. We try to pick something that's very natural, so we'll select a native grass species that will line the swale. Critical area planting sounds exactly just like what it is. So it's taking a soil sample, maybe you have a bare patch of grass, maybe you just can't get anything to grow, or maybe the topsoil has eroded so much that you can't plant anything. What we do is restore that organic matter in topsoil, and we'll give you a selection of plants or native grass species, depending on what you want, to cover that area so that it's no longer eroded. Stream stabilization, it's a little bit different than stream restoration. Some people confuse the terms. Stream stabilization, we work with what's there. We're not changing anything about the stream. We're just making sure that it stays exactly where it is. Restoration, we don't do that with our local cost share. That is a state cost share. It's a lot more management. It's a lot more design, permitting, a lot more expensive. You are changing the stream itself. You are changing the direction, the depth, what have you, everything, the profile of the stream. Riparian buffer management, I kind of talked about that. That's the 15 to 30 feet from the water's edge and back. Basically, we make sure that we can plant something that's going to stay there, provide wildlife habitat, and make sure that it's going to filter the nutrients before it reaches the stream and before the runoff reaches the stream. Our rain gardens, I've already talked about that. The pet waste receptacles, you might see those little green stands where people put their pet waste. Like I said, that's the #1 contributor to non-point source pollution in Charlotte. If your neighborhood or you or a place that you frequent does not have one, let me know.
So who maintains it?
So the homeowner maintains it, but we do set it up and we do provide the bags. You just have to make sure that it's emptied.
You put it in your own trash.
Nope, it comes with a trash can attached.
But then
And then
who empties the trash can?
Yeah.
That's the homeowner's responsibility, or the
And they
HOA.
would put that in their trash.
Sure, I know some neighborhoods that have a service that comes up and picks it up.
Oh,
So that's up to the HOA how they want to handle that, but we do provide everything else.
Do you have to have an HOA to get that?
Nope, it can be your own personal property if you wanted
So, I
to,
mean, it could be like on the, like I live on a corner, it could be on the front corner of.
as long as that's your property.
Oh, so the setback, it would, you have to think about the setback for the city, right?
Right. That's why it's a lot better to go through an HOA because you're not taking on that responsibility. But if you do see a space that needs one, let me know and I can reach out to them because, like I said, that's the #1 contributor. So the most important thing is that our program is completely voluntary. This is up to you. We work with you to meet your goals. If wildlife is something that is so important to you and you want to make sure that you have more habitat in the future, we will make that our #1 priority while implementing our conservation practice. So I think that's one of the great things about having local government, because we're willing to work with each and every one of you. So this is just our urban cost share program. If you are interested in our state cost share programs, I can reach out to you directly, or you can reach out to me. And I can answer your questions, but basically the state cost share allows for more funds. It's usually targeted towards agricultural land, but we are applying this year for Community Conservation Assistance Program. That is a large scale version of our urban cost share. So that those funds can go up to 50,000. So if you are thinking about a stream in your neighborhood or on your own yard, that's been an issue, or something even larger than that, that might be an option. Obviously, it has to follow the same protocol where we have a site visit, engineers come out and look at it, and it has to be ranked and voted on. But that is another option if you need access to more funds. So in summary, I think everybody can agree that conservation is very important. It's possible to have aesthetically pleasing lawns, but also provide that quality habitat that we need for our wildlife and making sure that our ecosystems are maintained for years to come. It's always important to consult a professional before you make any decisions that might alter a water body or the integrity of the landscape itself. You can reach out to me. I'm sure the stewards have great resources and are able to answer your questions. The NC State Extension Office as well. They're always ready to answer your questions. So when you go out from this meeting, make sure that you promote healthy biodiversity and making sure to keep your property, neighbors, and yourself safe as well. So I think that's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for having me. So if anybody has any questions, I don't know if anybody had any online, but
Yeah, let's run through those. Question from Gene Farmer. Which professionals can we ask about options for water management? Which you kind of touched on a little bit in your caution.
Yeah, I will add though, if it's a water quantity issue, let's say that you have massive amounts of runoff, you have standing water, you have issues with your culverts or drainage problems. That's not us. That is stormwater services. Depending on where you're located, it will either be the city stormwater services or Mecklenburg County stormwater services. And if you go on their website, they have a map of where they serve. So.
And she says, is the Mecklenburg Fire of Mint Hill eligible for your cost share program?
Yes, yes. We serve the Charlotte Mecklenburg area as well as all the municipalities. So that's all 6 surrounding the area as well.
And the last question, ideas to eliminate poison oak without chemicals.
Oh boy.
Could you repeat that?
How to eliminate poison oak without using chemicals.
Oh.
I saw a
Poison
solution that
ivy.
was like vinegar, like 50% of like vinegar, and then salt, and then I think it was like dish soap, and like you make that like concoction,
Isn't that so
and it would
chemical?
get rid of like weeds and like things you
That-
sprayed on.
That may still be considered a chemical blend.
Yeah.
I think what people are trying to get at is removing it without any additives.
Yeah.
So the only way I can think of off the top of my head is removing it mechanically. Obviously, don't touch it with your bare hands. Yeah, don't burn it. Don't burn it. If you've ever been around someone who accidentally burned poison ivy, it goes directly into the air and you breathe that in and it hurts. So don't do that. Okay, so I think our extension office, I might be wrong, but I think they have invasive species removal days where they will come out and volunteers will remove it, you know, with gloves on, and they'll do it mechanically. We used to have a program for that. We don't anymore. But they might be able to point you in the right direction because that is an option. I know that volunteers will go out and do that.
That was the last question.
Okay, that was. Oh, sorry.
An allergist can desensitize you to poison ivy, but really the only cure for, the only approach to poison ivy is to just stay at it.
Yeah, it is very persistent. And the person who asked the question didn't want any chemical additives, but I know that you can buy some. It's not my recommendation because you can over apply it. But basically it's almost like a glue paste and you can paint it on the poison ivy and it will kill it. It doesn't go to the root though. So again, you're going to have some kind of level of management having to come out there every year and remove it, but it will get rid of the top layer. Again, not my recommendation, but
Well, any part of the poison ivy is potent, and even if it's dead. Ask me how I know.
Even the dead wood or
Yeah.
the vines in the wintertime. And there are really three ways that the poison ivy demonstrates itself. One is just growing up from the ground. One is vining up the tree. And then the third is sticking those vines way out, and they look like tree branches, and people can just be walking through them.
Yep.
And get it.
Yeah, and the irony is that it's a great wildlife plant.
I'll say, I have poison ivy just growing out of the ground. But it happened to be a spot where I was like, well, I want to mulch here a path anyways, so I did the cardboard and mulch.
Nice.
And it hasn't come back yet.
Oh, yeah.
So that's non-chemical.
Just covering it up. pretty
Yeah,
much?
I just did cardboard and then probably about 6 inches of mulch
Wow.
over it. It's been 3
Great.
years.
That's smart.
It's popping up other places, but not there.
It just never goes away, does it?
What are some native grasses?
Okay, great question. So I like to keep it simple, and when I'm recommending a grass, I recommend a fescue Bermuda grass blend, and that way you can ensure that you get grass all year round, because fescue is a winter grass and Bermuda is a summer grass. So it will alternate. You'll never have bare patches, and the great thing about it is you don't mow in the winter, and fescue needs at least 6 inches to properly photosynthesize. So you're getting the benefits of the grass, and it's actually better for your maintenance. But you can, if you go on that gardener toolbox, Master Gardener toolbox, it has a whole list that will be better suited for your individual property.
And
So,
Bermuda and fescue are non-native turtles.
Yeah.
And we do have a list too on NCWF's website and on the Butterfly Highway website. Great resources for native plants, native grasses, all of them.
You mean
How
So a
about,
lot
how
of
about the
the
grasses that run, like centipede or St. Augustine? Those-
There is
No,
one
native,
not,
okay.
there is one native grass that for lawns, and I can't remember what it is. Dr. Mellenchamp had it. I don't know if anybody, do you know what it
St.
is?
Augustine's native to like
St. Augustine.
Florida,
Yeah.
some of the southeast. I
Yeah.
think stream southeastern North Carolina, maybe.
Yeah, but most lawns are not native grasses. When we talk about native grasses, they're more the things that are gonna get tall that you would use in your garden for accents in your garden, things like little blue stem, pink muhly grass.
There's some attractive.
Switchgrass,
plum
brim
grasses.
sedge, and Indian
They're all
grass.
warm season,
Yeah.
though. All native grasses are warm season. There's no full season native
Yeah.
grasses really here in Vermont. So they go around.
Yeah.
But they still have all the cover for wildlife in the winter. You don't cut it back until April or May when it starts to green up. Then you can cut off those.
So it has winter interest, because it keeps its form. And like Alden said, it provides habitat.
but if you live in an area with an HOA where they require a certain grass,
Right.
that's a good compromise. So just think about that fescue Bermuda blend. May not be as native, but
Right.
it does the job, and it has ground cover, so.
So I have a question. When you have a stream and it's worn away and you've got those sides that are just 90 degrees, what can you do? I mean,
Right.
can you do live staking? Can you?
Okay, so when it's that 90 degrees that you see on a stream bank, that's called incised banks. Kind of like your incisor teeth, they're very straight and pointy. So you could plant live stakes. I will say, in this area, live stakes have an 80% mortality rate. They love to get just washed away right after you put them in. The best thing to do is, first of all, monitor it. The second is to call one of your professionals. One of the practices that we do when we talk about stream restoration is we implement something called a bankful bench. And it actually looks like a set of stairs or a bench. So the bank will go up and flatten, then up and flatten again. And what that does, it's on both sides. It will allow the water to move up and fill and move up and fill without overtopping and eating away at the sides of the bank, right? On those bankful benches, we're able to implement a series of matting. So that coir matting that I pointed out, the coconut fiber, in some cases, it's that permanent liner. We're able to implement that as well as sturdy vegetation, sometimes live stakes. If we can get them cheaply, I mean, they are a great way. They will root. And then some of our sedges and grasses that are native to the area as well. Planting really hardy shrubs that their roots will ground into the bankful bench, and then using riprap or rock, those big rocks, to help dissipate some of the water flow. So when the water hits the rock or a hard surface, the momentum kind of dies and it won't eat at the bank anymore. That's just our practice standard. I know that if you do hire like a contractor, they might have a different idea. That's the best way to do it with a conservation focused mind. So unfortunately, when it is really incised though, there's not much that an individual homeowner can do to stop it. It's already, streams will do what they want to do. And once you fix it, they will try to go right back to how they were. So you have to come up with an engineered design to make sure that it's the new profile is gonna stay where it is.
You have a question?
Yeah, I got several questions. Okay. The use of native plants is so just a general question is what is your definition of a native plant? Is it something that was just naturally grew here, or can it be native plants that have been improved in some way, either through a mutation that got propagated or some kind of breeding with a native plant? I mean,
Right.
And then also, just because something's native doesn't mean it's good or better. So I assume the purpose of native plants is that it requires less care and maybe provides some kind of wildlife.
Absolutely. So
I don't know what, so I'm curious as to what you mean by exactly native plant.
yeah, so our agency's idea of a native plant is a plant that naturally grows here. It does not compete with other native species necessarily. Now, if we're just talking about native plants in the grand scheme of things, that would include non-native, non-invasive plants. These are plants that have somehow migrated here, that are non-invasive, so they're not going to be out competing our natives in any way, but they're providing some kind of important environmental service. So maybe that's, yeah, maybe that's the wildlife habitat
So
ground cover.
Somebody growing native plants and there's a mutation, variegated,
Mhm.
and cut that off and start propagating that. And you would consider that still a native plant, even though you wouldn't actually see the variegated form of the
Right.
wildlife.
So there are mutated hybrids,
They're cultivars.
cultivars,
So,
yes.
well,
Yeah, you go ahead.
you want
You
me to
speak.
pipe in?
Yes.
So, native plants are, there are a couple different definitions of them, but one that's widely accepted is that they were plants that were here before Europeans came to our country. So they were the plants that were just, growing here. I mean, there were people that lived here, but they tended to, they used those plants. So it was, they were ones that were naturally occurring on our continent before Europeans came to this continent. There are things called cultivars that they're naturally occurring. So there's going to be some kind of mutation. Somebody discovers it, they take it and they propagate it, but they're all clones.
Right.
They because if they cross-pollinate, you're going to get something, you're not going to get that genetic variability. But then there's native to areas. So things that are native to our region are not necessarily native to the upper, the upper Northwest.
Survival in that environment.
They're adapted to that environment. So it has to do with your soils, what soils you have, what your climate is, the amount of light that you get. Those are all things that factor into that. And And I think what you were alluding to is plants that are naturalized, so like dandelions are not native, but they've become naturalized to our area. Invasive plants are the ones that outcompete, what we consider ones that outcompete. If it's a native plant that, we call them aggressive, we don't call them invasive. I mean, because there are some native plants that'll take over.